NATO just said they may start striking Russia as a response to Russia constantly violating NATO airspace. And Russia's President Vladimir Putin says, "We're not looking for any trouble, but if you want to start a war, we're ready." Nobody can deny that since Russia has been fighting a full-scale war for 3 years, they are much more battle-hardened than any other NATO country, and their overall economy is much more militarily aligned. Russia produces its own steel, its own food, its own energy, so it's not like they could be blockaded from key resources by NATO if they ever did go to war. Remember, Russia has been fighting another country for 3 years, and that country is just as battle-hardened, which is Ukraine. For now, let's not even consider the troops and equipment that Russia lost just to Ukraine. And I'm just going to show you some stats between Russia and NATO without US help. When it comes to active military personnel, Russia has 1.32 million people, while NATO has 2.10. Now, like I said, the Russian troops are much more battle-hardened, but there are 800,000 more NATO troops, and they are nowhere near as depleted, exhausted, or just internally destroyed from the ravages of war like Russia is. Now, you're going to see a green dot here. I set this table up, and I put the green dot over which country or which alliance has more modern equipment. So when it comes to fighter jets, Russia has about 1,000, and NATO, without the US, has 2,000 fighter jets, and they are much more modern than anything Russia has right now. But something Russia does have a lot of is bombers. They have dozens of bombers, while NATO, without the US, only has a few because the US is the #1 bombing aircraft producer. But again, those bombers have to face these 2,000 NATO more modern fighter jets and, of course, air defense systems. NATO has much more modern and layered air defenses than Russia. I'm not sure if you guys remember, but during the 12-day war against Iran and, of course, in Syria, they were heavily reliant on S-300 and S-400 air defense systems, which is considered Russia's top air defense piece of equipment, and they failed miserably. In fact, every piece of air defense equipment in Syria was completely destroyed, and all the S-300s in Iran, or at least the vast majority of them, were completely taken out. Russia has already been begging Turkey to give them back the air defense systems that they're not even using, and there are several countries like India that are considering whether or not they even want to purchase Russian air defense systems just because they've performed so poorly. Now, out of this list of over 30 different military categories, the rest of Russia's advantages are long-range rocketry, by far, theater ballistic missiles, so like the hypersonic Iskander. Europe without the United States doesn't really have anything like that, and that's about it. Now, of course, everyone says, well, Russia has nukes. Okay, they have about 5,000 nuclear weapons. Europe has about 500. But remember, Russia, or the Soviet Union, did not maintain the vast majority of their nuclear arsenals. So I would not be surprised if not even the Russian military knew how many, in fact, worked. While the 500 or so that NATO has without the United States, 100% of them work and are more advanced. I'm going to get out of the way so you could see this full list, and I want you to pause and read it, okay? All right, pause, read, look. You see it? In almost every single major military avenue, even without the United States, NATO stomps on Russia. And again, NATO hasn't been fighting in some war that's cost them over 1.17 million troops, 68,000 vehicles and fuel tanks, 11,000 tanks, 430 planes. And if you want to look at this list, pause to read. There you go. But again, if Russia went up against NATO, it's not just them that Russia's fighting, it's also Ukraine, that one country that has been devoted for 3 years straight to fighting off Russia, learning all of Russia's tactics, and of course making the best drones on the planet. Ukraine is already bleeding Russia dry. Ukraine plus NATO means that Russia collapses. And what would happen to Russia? Just like in the 1990s, America would come in and save the country from a complete and total economic collapse. And if NATO did have the cojones to manage a first strike against Russia, no way the United States would miss an opportunity to sell even more weapons to that alliance. So our president could keep taking naps next to Marco Rubio and let the money roll in for the military-industrial complex. If you add all of this up, it just looks like Russia is trying so hard, with the help of NATO, to still be this big boogeyman of the Western Hemisphere. And they're failing at it. Let me know if the lists I showed you guys was helpful, and thanks for watching.